everyone. Thanks for coming to our webinar on caring for the caregiver with Michelle O'Rourke, whose newest book is Healthy Caregiving. I actually have a copy right here. The title is Healthy Caregiving, Perspectives for Caring Professionals in company with Henri J.M. Nouwen. Just a word about the webinar before we carry on to Michelle's presentation. My name is Joe Sinosak. I'm the Publishing Director of Novalis Publishing. Novalis is one of the three partners who have helped to put together this webinar. The other two are 23rd Publications and the Henri Nouwen Society. So over the course of this next hour, you'll get a chance to meet some of my colleagues from 23rd and from the Henri Nouwen Society. And of course, you'll get to hear Michelle. At this stage, I would like to turn the floor over to Therese Ratliff, the publisher of 23rd Publications. So over to you, Therese.
Thank you, Joe. I'm so happy to be here with all of you today to share this wonderful event. And what impresses me really as the publisher of the US version of this book is just how timely this topic is. Just the level of overwhelm that all of us are feeling has really come to fever pitch over the past few weeks. Between the COVID virus, the racism crisis, the riots that are erupting all around the world, the exhaustion of dealing with our own circumstances, whether that's job loss or financial troubles, working and parenting challenges from home. All of this weight is piled on top of the caregiving pressures that many of us are already dealing with on a daily basis. So this conversation today is really a blessed event, a gift for all of us. And I'm so pleased to be part of this chance to just take a pause, take a breath, and spend some time considering caregiving in a new way this afternoon.
Thanks very much, Therese. Certainly, it will be a special afternoon, especially with Michelle here with us to talk about this important subject. At this stage, I just want to say a little word about how it will unfold, in fact. We are going to have Michelle's presentation in a few minutes. Before that, I'm going to be introducing Karen Pascal, the Executive Director of the Nouwen Society. And of course, the Nouwen Society and their work has been absolutely vital to the success of this project. And we're very, very happy that Novalis and 23rd and the Nouwen Society could collaborate on this, not only on the book, but also on this webinar for you today. So I'll introduce Karen in a minute, but I'd just like to say that what you will be hearing is Karen, and then a presentation from Michelle O'Rourke. There is a chance during the course of the presentation, if you have questions, to type those out on the Q&A function that you'll see at the bottom of your screen. And those will be sort of quarterbacked by Dan Smart, who's the Associate Publisher of 23rd Publications. And after Michelle is done, Dan will be picking questions randomly from that and giving them to Michelle to answer. So please, save your questions, type them up and send them to us through the Q&A function, and we'll get to them as best we can at the end of the presentation. I also want to mention one more thing before we get started, and that is at the end of this presentation, you will see a slide with some information about how you can order a copy of Healthy Caregiving at a 20% discount off the retail price. Those of our attendees here with us today in the United States can order from 23rd Publications, and you'll see their website address there. And if you happen to be in Canada or elsewhere around the world, you'll see the website address for Novalis Publishing. Use that and you'll be able to get your copy of the book. So let me move right on here and turn the floor over to Karen Pascal. Over to you, Karen.
Thank you very much, Joe. Our mission at the Henri Nouwen Society is to share Henri Nouwen's wisdom with the world so people can reimagine their lives in light of God's unconditional love. Over these past 4 years, the Henri Nouwen Society have been developing an outreach to caregivers because we were aware that Henri Nouwen had so much to offer to this community. We certainly didn't have the foresight to see a pandemic that would completely swamp us all. But now that we're here, we feel we have some resources that are really needed. First, we created a series of books. The first was Hope for Caregivers, a 40-day devotional for this frontline community. And then we did Courage for Caregivers, Sustenance for the Journey, in the company of Henri Nouwen. But in the process of developing this series and of offering retreats and workshops, we became aware we needed a special book for professional caregivers. And that this didn't just mean medical caregivers, but our umbrella included teachers and social workers, chaplains, and many, many more whose life work involves caring for the needs of others. We asked Michelle O'Rourke to create our latest book in this caregiving series, Healthy Caregiving, Perspectives for Caring Professionals, in company with Henri J.M. Nouwen. Stronger Philanthropy helped us fund this endeavor, and Novalis and 23rd Publications became our publishers. Let me tell you a little bit about the writer, Michelle O'Rourke. She's a nurse with a background including emergency nursing, parish nursing, hospice palliative care, and spirituality. In 2007, she spent a year doing extensive research on Henri Nouwen's life and writings, particularly around the spirituality of death and dying. That intensive study changed her life personally, and her research was eventually published in the book, Befriending Death, Henri Nouwen and the Spirituality of Dying. This was followed by another important and excellent book, Embracing the End of Life, Help for Those Who Accompany the Dying. Well, as you can hear, Michelle is steeped in what Nouwen can offer, but she also brings an excellence in terms of her very practical, hands-on experience as a nurse. She's a gifted writer and communicator, so I'm really delighted to introduce to you today Michelle O'Rourke. Michelle, thank you for bringing your deep knowledge of Henri and your knowledge of the acute needs of professional caregivers together in this new book, Healthy Caregiving. I gotta tell you, I love the title of the book, Healthy Caregiving. What a timely book as we all see the vital contribution caregivers are making on the front line of our battle with COVID-19. Michelle, can you help us understand some of the ways you believe Henri's wisdom can help us to navigate these difficult times we find ourselves in?
Thank you very much, Karen, and thank you to Novalis and 23rd Publications as well, and to all of you who are joining us. Much of the information that I'm sharing today is included in my new book, Healthy Caregiving. But because the writing was finished before the pandemic, I have added a few things to the webinar today, which are more specific to the stresses that caregivers are facing now. A few years ago, the Henri Nouwen Society developed some materials specifically for family caregivers, which Karen spoke about, and you can find them on their website. My focus in writing this book was to speak more specifically to those who we would know as professional caregivers, people who do this work as a career or a ministry. However, I think that the material that I'm sharing today will speak to both the formal and the informal caregiver, because I know that both of you have joined us. Henri's writings ask us to look at the very definition of the word care. And it points out that care is not task-oriented. I think we often get caught up in understanding that care is something that we do. I'm here to offer you mouth care or foot care. But the word itself brings us back to the real meaning, which is an invitation to enter into someone else's pain or suffering before we do something about it. So caring is about being present to another person's pain or their situation. So for those of you who may not know Henri Nouwen, he was a Dutch Catholic priest, but he was also a psychologist. And I believe his training in psychology and his understanding of the human person is why his writings are inspiring to anyone, regardless of their faith background or tradition. Although he was an academic and he taught at prestigious universities, he was also a prolific writer. His books were mostly about the questions and struggles that all of us face, which is why they were so well loved. Henri wrote about things like compassion and intimacy, being a wounded healer, and about the dignity of those who are vulnerable, including ourselves. He died young at the age of 64 from a heart attack, but he lived the last 10 years of his life at L'Arche Daybreak in Canada, where he learned firsthand how to care physically for others. And he also came to a new understanding of the need to take care of himself because he struggled with his own mental wellness. So Henri gives us insights on caring. The book explores a number of these themes in Henri's writings, but first of all, that there is a mutuality in the care relationship. And although we always hope to bring comfort and healing to the ones we care for, we also realize that they bring many gifts to us. So the things that I have learned about patience, courage, perseverance, and unconditional love, I've learned from the people that I've been privileged to care for. I also recognize that I'm not perfect and that I have my own fears and weaknesses. And they are part of who I am. And I can't separate those from who I am as a nurse. I bring them with me into the care encounters that I have. And if I'm open, I can also be transformed and healed and nourished by the people that I care for. We recognize also that besides the gifts, there are many, many challenges, both for the person being cared for, as well as the person doing the caregiving. And we will talk about some of the ways that we can stay healthy as caregivers. One thing we know about people who are givers is that they're generally not very good at receiving. We grow up thinking that it's better to give than to receive. But we have discovered that those who care for others must take time for themselves, or they'll burn out and they won't have anything left to give. So we might see that seeking care for ourselves is selfish, or that allowing someone to care for us is a sign of weakness. But yet it's truly a sign of health when we allow others to care for us. So there are many, many challenges and stressors in our lives that impact the care that we can provide. And they also impact the amount of compassion that we can muster on any given day. So depending on the role we have will depend on the specific challenges we face. Whether we're in healthcare or chaplaincy, social work or ministry, whether we're a trained volunteer or a family caregiver, we will all face challenges of some kind. These include physical challenges, challenges on our bodies, the physical toll of caring for other people, lifting and transferring. Perhaps you're dealing with driving long distances or working shift work or standing for long periods. These all take a toll on our physical health. And then we have emotional and mental challenges that include our experiences of grief, loss, frustration, guilt, isolation, feeling overwhelmed or unsupported in our roles, feeling hopeless, having difficulty with exhaustion, or feeling like our work is never done. Balancing tension is something we also find we have to do in our roles. Giving people freedom to make choices, whether we agree with them or not. Dealing with family members who have differing viewpoints. Or the tension between the kind of care that you want to provide and the limitations of time or barriers in the workplace. And finally, we have what I call spiritual challenges, those challenges that touch our heart and our soul. The spiritual challenges we face in our work can include having to let go of being in control, of difficulties living with life's big questions, of the ongoing struggles that seem to deplete our hope and weigh heavy on our heart. But besides these job-related stresses, we all have day-to-day stresses that can impact the energy and capacity we have to care for other people. These things are more insidious. We don't realize how much they add to the weight of what we're carrying each and every day as we go about our caregiving work. So the first one is our personal stresses. That would include our family issues, our finances, our struggles with managing our schedules, maybe the fact that we have to work 2 jobs, or maybe the fact right now that we don't have a job to go to. And then there's our professional stressors. Those can include the stress of working in a broken healthcare system, a stretched education or social service system, working within the parameters of a religious organization, and all of the policies and procedures we have to follow, the deadlines, the working long hours, all those things that go along with our professional work. And then we have the global issues that affect us, that we carry every day. And I think there are things that we've been carrying for a long time, things that we worry about, like climate change and the economy. And right now, COVID-19 and the pandemic, as well as what we're seeing with all the stress of the racism that's bubbled to the surface again around the world as we struggle with that. So not only has all of this affected our ability to care for others, it affects how we cope. So something we're all experiencing right now, no matter what kind of a job we have, is that the pandemic has changed our lives as the way we know it. There has been so much fear in whether we're going to contact the disease, whether we're going to bring it home from work and give it to our loved ones, fear for the people we care for, on top of all of the many losses we've had to endure. The loss of life the way we knew it, the loss of our ability to even hug our families and friends, the loss of being able to take care of another person without wearing protective gear, the loss of physical relationships that we've known and how to provide care over the phone now or over the computer, the loss of the ability to gather, the loss of the ability to gather in worship, the loss of community, the loss of seeing our friends and our colleagues the way we used to. So much loss, including a loss of control over any of it. So when we talk that with the losses of tens of thousands of people who have died, many of them alone because of visitor restrictions, and the loss of the ability to have funerals or celebrations to honor them. Loss of life as we've known it, with no end in sight as to what the future holds. So I believe that much of what we're dealing right now is grief, because grief is our response to loss. And we've lost so much in these last few months. So I want to offer a few suggestions that might help you to get through this difficult time, which are lessons that we've learned from doing grief work and working with people who are bereaved, because all of us are grieving. And all of us can take the steps to try to stay healthy during this difficult time. These steps include acknowledging our feelings and our emotions. We have to get in touch with those, and we have to find a way to express them. I know for me, there's just some days that I just feel like crying, and it seems to be coming out of nowhere, and I don't know why. But I think it's this heaviness that we all feel. Sharing the stories and the losses helps us to process them. If we leave these feelings and these stories inside of us, they'll fester, and they can decrease our capability to be able to care. So it's healthy when we can talk about them, and it's okay if we cry. That's important. Letting go of the things that we can't control, not spending our energy worrying about things that we can't change. We have to remember, most of all, that grief is a long process and that it's not experienced in linear stages. So yes, we might have anger, and then we move to denial, and eventually to acceptance. But then that anger is going to come back, and the denial is going to come back. We'll have good days, and we'll have bad days. But that's normal. That's how we grieve. And no two people grieve the same way. So it's important for us to remember that we have to be compassionate with ourselves. Caring for ourselves, being gentle with ourselves, and having manageable expectations, not expecting ourselves to be everything for everyone, is what's really important. And every single day, if you hear yourself saying, well, I should be doing this or I shouldn't be doing that, stop yourself and ask, am I putting some expectations on myself that I really don't need or can't handle right now? I think that the next thing that can help is ritual. And we know that, and I think we really miss the rituals that we have that give us strength because we're not able to gather. And these can be something that happens in your home. It can be something as simple as when you're feeling really anxious, or you've got some of these emotions coming to the surface, or you've had a particular loss and you want to remember that person or that situation, just light a candle and sit for 10 minutes and focus on that and quiet yourself. That will help you to begin to process. It helps to bring closure. It helps us to be able to ritualize these things that are happening to us in our life. And we can do that very simply. Some other keys to addressing caregiving challenges. Number one is support. Making sure that you have a personal support system, that you've got somebody to talk to. And if you live alone, making sure that you're connected to family and friends by telephone or computer. If you're from a workplace, often workplaces have supports set up as well. Counseling, employee assistance programs, debriefing, the opportunities just to huddle. I know that I've been facilitating Zoom phone calls between groups of staff and different groups of nurses, just so they could talk, just so they could share their stories and their stresses. So the second thing is knowledge. It's important for us to learn about things like compassion fatigue and burnout and how to mitigate those. And we're going to talk a little bit about that today. Knowledge about the resources that we have that can help us to get through. And the last thing is perspective. I think sometimes all we have to do is change our viewpoint on how we're looking at things, and that can make a difference. And I really believe that that's what Henri's wisdom has to offer us. But when we talk about something like compassion fatigue, it's a profound emotional and physical erosion that takes place when helpers are unable to refuel and regenerate. And here are just a few of the signs and symptoms. Experts tell us that this kind of fatigue left unchecked can really lead to the inability to care at all. And it goes along with other conditions such as moral distress and vicarious trauma and burnout. So it's really important for us to try to avoid these outcomes as much as possible. And how do we do that? By building resilience. We also know from the research that our 3 things will help us to protect helpers and keep them healthy. And if we can do that, then we'll have the capacity not only to stay healthy ourselves, but to continue to provide care for others. These things are self-care, self-awareness, and reducing chronic stress. Many people believe that they're really too busy to take care of themselves, and that self-care is just one more thing to add to their already busy to-do list. But it's actually an intentional way of living, where your choices and your attitudes are integrated into your everyday life and routine. Who supports you? What refreshes you? Only you know that. And you can't give what you don't have. So if you're empty and depleted, you're not going to be able to provide good care to anyone else. And I think we all look at this little icon every day of the almost dead battery. And when you're charging your phone, stop for a minute and think, what did I do for myself today? There are a number of things, and actually I go into detail about these in the book, But I just want to touch on a couple of things to remind us about some of the things that can help us to refill our cup. One of the things that I really believe is the most important is to take stock of what's on your plate. Givers are people who just keep putting more and more things on our plate, and we really never take anything off. And before you know it, we're overwhelmed. And every once in a while, it's a good exercise to sit down and just really figure out, what do I have going on in my life right now? And how can I prioritize that? What can I delegate to others? What can I get rid of? What's not serving me or my family or my clients? And be selective. I know in my own life, when I've reached turning points where I've had too many projects and even too many jobs on the docket, I've had to actually leave jobs and projects that I've loved because I knew that I was being depleted. Taking time for yourself every day. And that may be 5 minutes in the morning with a cup of tea, or in the evening before you go to bed. Just trying to relax, trying to get in touch with what's happening inside of you. Enjoying nature, going for a walk, listening to music. Exercise, sleep well, take naps. Learn the words no and enough. Those are so important. And engage in self-reflective practice. The second thing that they tell us about raising resilience is to have more self-awareness. So taking the time for regular self-reflective practice, whether that's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, just some quiet time to get back in touch with what's going on inside of you. How are you doing? How are you coping? Working on your own personal and professional growth. Working through some of your own grief issues, your biases, your beliefs. Being aware of your health and your body's reactions. I always knew for me, when my stomach started to hurt, I better figure out what was going on because it was my body's way of reacting to stress. Working with a mentor, a counselor, a spiritual director, a coach, all those things are helpful. And I think that right now, this time of forced self-isolation and change is an opportunity for us to really examine the way that we've lived, the way we spent our time, the way we spent our money, and perhaps make a commitment to live differently in the future. Taking time to reflect and raise your self-awareness is a lifelong process. And finding time for yourself to do this inner work is a gift that you can give to yourself. But it's also a gift you give to your loved ones, your colleagues, your clients, because the more self-aware and the more inner wellness you have, the more effectively you're going to be able to relate and respond to the needs of others. And you'll notice that last point where it talks about practicing self-compassion. Self-compassion is so important. We are not always good friends to ourselves. And sometimes we need to learn how to be gentle with ourselves, to cut ourselves some slack, especially during times like this, and to manage the expectations we put on ourselves. Because often it's not that other people are putting those expectations on us. We put them on ourselves, and then we become overwhelmed. And in the book, there are some really good resources that are talked about that help us in understanding self-awareness and self-compassion. The third point in building resilience is about reducing chronic stress. Chronic stress is a scourge in our lives and our society. I think sometimes we wear our busyness like a badge. You know, I'm so busy, but look at me. But we cannot live with our cortisol levels through the roof 24/7. If we live that way and we're in a hyper-stress mode all the time, we will become physically and emotionally sick. And if that happens, then we're no good to anyone. There are many ways to decompress, to try to relax your mind and your body from the chaos of every day. One way includes finding moments just to learn how to take a deep breath, how to refocus on the present. These mindfulness moments can bring us back to reality and tame our chaotic mind. They also can help us learn how to be more present to ourselves and to those we care for. And there are many ways to learn this discipline of being able to bring awareness and mindfulness moments into our lives. So I encourage you to look at these different resources and to find something that works for you, because it's really important for you to be able to learn how to decompress. It's also a discipline that I encourage you to use, because when you're stressed, if you've formed this habit, you can move into that moment much more quickly. I want my last slide to just kind of talk a little bit about Henri's cardinal rule of caregiving, and that's what I call it. There are lots of things that we can consider when we're talking about caring well and keeping ourselves healthy. But Henri reminds us that the most important thing is to remember we are not alone. We must never try to do this work by ourselves. This is a true recipe for burnout and compassion fatigue. And I hope that you can be convinced of that and allow others to support you in the many ways that they can. I think sometimes, people say to us, "What can I do for you?" And we're so quick to say, "Oh, I'm good. I'm doing fine. We're doing fine." When if we go inside, really we're not. And we need to say, "Yes, thank you. Here's how you can help." Accept the gifts that we're being given. Allow others to learn the beauty of caring by being able to care for us and the people that we care for. And as Henri says, care is not an endurance test. We should, whenever possible, care together with others. So I hope you found this information helpful. As I said, there are many more tips and tricks and things that are spoken about in more deeply in the book. And I'm just going to move out of my slides now, and we'll come back to Karen.
Oh, Michelle, you are such a treasure. This was excellent. And I bet there's a lot of people who go, "My goodness, she has seen me. She gets inside my skin." It's been excellent. And the book is excellent. This is kind of just the icing on the cake we've just gotten. I want to throw it over to Dan, because Dan, I know questions are coming from all over the place. We'd love to hear from you. Share with us some of the questions. And Michelle, thank you. Thank you for the way you have woven together Henri and the wisdom that he had with the wisdom that you have. And at such a time, I'm very, very touched by it. It's just excellence. And we're honored to have you as part of our team. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
Thank you, Karen. Yes, we've got lots of questions coming in. I'm just going to pick a few here. Someone asked, "I find it really hard as a professional caregiver because in my life, everybody sees me as so strong and no one's really coming forward to the support that I really need. How could you help me?"
I think that's a really good question. It's also a difficult question, because we know, especially if we are the person who's kind of the strong one in the family or in the group, that people come to us. But what we have to come to understand about ourselves, and this is the piece about self-reflection, is that we need support too. And even if people aren't offering to us, we have to ask for it. We have to seek it out. We have to realize that we have our own struggles, our own weaknesses, and we have to also work through these things so that we can stay strong. So not being afraid to ask, not being afraid to put support into place is really important.
Here's another one. I'm a caregiver for my husband who's had a stroke and is affected on the right side, his right side, that doesn't really work well. As a caregiver, I feel I should be helping him to be more mobile, to do exercises, but he's resistant to my help. What should my frame of mind be about this? Should I just be happy that I can be there for him as support and not force him? I'm a little conflicted as to what my role should be.
Okay, thank you for that question. And I think two things come to mind. The first one is I go back to that slide where it talks about balancing tension. You know, there's that tension of, you know, should I be using tough love? What's best for him? Or should I be forcing him? And I think the first thing is about communication. Is to be able to really sit down and say, you know, to your husband, you know what, honey, I know this is a struggle for you. Tell me about how I can help. Tell me about how you're feeling. Tell me about what you want to be able to do. The other thing is, again, to rely on the supports and the resources. So as you have people who are perhaps coming to your house to help you with physiotherapy, or you've got resources to fall back on, have them help you as well. Don't feel that you have to do it all on your own. I think when we own that, it weighs us down and is a burden to us. So making sure you have somebody to talk to about how you're feeling, and having the courage to talk to your husband about that really honestly and ask him how he's feeling. I think that's important.
Here's another question, and this is about the healthcare system. How should I handle with my patients the negativity related with all the frustration that people are feeling about the healthcare system when I myself am a healthcare professional?
I think that no matter where we are at in the chain, you know, all of us are frustrated. We wish that we had more time. We wish there was more in our budget so that we could take care of more people even better. But I think a lot of times it has to come down to, it brings us back to that thing about mindfulness in the moment. Whoever you're actually spending that time with in that conversation, to try to focus on them and their needs, even though they're being negative, to try to perhaps help them see one of the good things that's happening. And doing that for ourselves as well. As we reflect at the end of the day, it's easy to reflect on the stresses. But what are one or two things that I'm grateful for? What was maybe one conversation I had today with Mr. Smith that went well? And if it didn't, how might I talk to Mr. Smith tomorrow a little differently? So we can learn and we can grow by doing this self-reflective practice, by taking a minute and kind of focusing on what's happening and then doing that reflective work and allowing it to fill us.
That's great advice, Michelle. Thank you. Here's another. What are some of the ways to begin building self-care into my own daily life?
That's a really good question. So for me, I think I had to learn that the hard way. I was the kind of person, I was the oldest of 7. I was always taking care of everybody and everything. And my husband and I had 4 kids in 6 years, and I was working 2 jobs and going to university. It was just always chaotic. And I realized I needed to find a way to keep myself healthy. So as an extrovert, one of the things that I used to really find a lot of strength from was meeting up with my support group, my girlfriends who really helped me to stay grounded and helped me to be compassionate with myself. But instead of just saying, oh, well, we need to do lunch sometimes, I started to schedule it in my schedule. When are we doing lunch? Let's put it in next Tuesday. Because if it wasn't in my calendar, it wasn't going to happen. So you can make choices that the things that fill you up, you make a decision intentionally to put that in your calendar, whatever that is. The other thing is to just even put things in your day. So like I said, it doesn't have to be long. Getting up 5 minutes earlier and just sitting quietly with your coffee before you put your phone on, before you put your computer on, just breathing, just getting in touch with yourself. Maybe doing the same thing at the end of the day, sitting in a bath, sitting on the front porch, smelling the flowers, just, being in nature, whatever it does it for you. For family caregivers, I think one of the things that we suggest is, every time you get up to do something for the person that you're caring for, let's say you get up to make them a cup of tea or you get up to get them a sweater, you get up and do that for yourself too. Make yourself a cup of tea, get yourself a sweater, grab yourself, 5 minutes to read your book. It's not really hard if it becomes intentional and you can take little things at a time and work them into your day.
Good advice. Michelle, can you talk a little about the difference between compassion fatigue and burnout?
Yes. So compassion fatigue is something that specifically happens to people that are in a caregiving profession. So it's because you're providing care and you're expending that energy to others that you actually, some people can get to the point where they just can't care anymore. Some people who really suffer deeply from compassion fatigue need professional counseling to be able to kind of get back to where they even care. Now, burnout is something that it can happen to people who work at the bank. I mean, burnout doesn't have to happen to somebody who takes care of people. Burnout is something that happens when we lose that ability for our jobs to be able to be fulfilling. We're overwhelmed, we lose interest. And a lot of times, people who suffer from burnout can change jobs or change situations, and they can kind of get their spark back and get back on the right track. But people who suffer from compassion fatigue often suffer it in conjunction with something we call vicarious trauma. People who listen to other people's sufferings and stories all day, even though that suffering didn't happen to them, they suffer themselves. And so it's this suffering that weighs them down and actually gets to the point where they cannot care. So, these are all the reasons why we have to take these steps early in our career or before we suffer from compassion fatigue and burnout, to be able to put good things into place, ways that we're going to keep ourselves healthy, ways that we're going to take care of ourselves so that we don't fall into that, hopefully don't fall into compassion fatigue and burnout.
Here's another. Can you talk a little about mindfulness and how we can sort of incorporate that into our daily life?
Sure. So mindfulness, some people think that it's a really big thing, and if I need to take yoga or I need to learn how to do meditation or contemplative prayer, mindfulness is very simple. Mindfulness is an awareness of the present moment without judgment. So that if you kind of stop and think about it, our minds are just spinning all the time. And a lot of it's filled with the stuff that, especially now in COVID, that I used to be able to do that I can't do anymore, and the stuff that I'm worried about tomorrow. But if we get into a moment, maybe it's a moment where we're feeling particularly anxious, to take a few deep breaths, and some of the mindfulness practices you can learn, you become aware of your breathing. You just stop what you're doing. You try to focus your mind, not on the past, not on the future, but on what's happening right now. And you can do it just for a few moments. And what this can do for you is to help you ground yourself again, help you kind of leave the chaos aside. So let's say you're going on to a telephone call with one of your clients that you're caring for, or a colleague, or you're facing a really stressful moment. If you take a few minutes to take some deep breaths and to bring yourself back to what's really important, back to what's happening now, you can focus on that person and that encounter a lot better. And it's by doing some of these things that help us to learn to focus on our breathing. There's lots and lots of resources out there, lots of websites. People can find, what works for them. But basically, it's how can I take these moments throughout the day to stop and to savor. We call even mindfulness eating. A lot of us know we spend an hour making a big dinner and then we scarf it down in 5 minutes and we never even tasted anything. But if we just savor every bite, how much differently is that experience? So how can we savor moments? How can we check in with our senses? It might be sitting on the front porch looking at the beautiful redbud tree that's flowering across the street for 5 minutes. That's enough to bring us back to the present. And so moments of mindfulness aren't hard, but we just have to become aware of the importance of building those into our lives and getting the discipline to do that.
Thank you, Michelle. And Michelle, we have a lot of questions from people who are sole caregivers, and they know they're supposed to take care of themselves at some point, but they don't really feel like they have a chance to get a break. Do you have any advice for them?
I think there are a couple of things. Sole caregivers, it's such a difficult job. But what I know about being a part of the healthcare system is that there are also a lot of resources in our community that we could take advantage of. Groups like the Alzheimer's Society or the different agencies that offer help for different chronic diseases or for palliative care, they have friendly home visitors, people that will come and, spend an hour. So then you can go and take a nap or get your hair done or go to the grocery store or whatever. So again, it's that ability to ask for help and to look for help and to accept help. The other thing for family caregivers is to realize that sometimes we're feeding our own need. Well, I need to be doing this. And so if I'm not there present every moment, what if they need me? Well, it's okay to step back. They'll let you know if they need you. And yes, there's some practical things with that. But when they take a nap, how can you step out of the room and do something for yourself? Find some ways in the ways that you're caring. Lots of times we have neighbors and friends and families that'll say, what can I do for you? Well, then give them a basket of laundry and say, this is what you can do for me. Help people to help you and recognize that that's not a sign of weakness. That's what's going to keep you healthy. And so it's this awareness that, even Henri talks about when our presence is there even when we're not physically there. And I think that's an important thing that we try to teach our family caregivers, sometimes, especially in hospice where I work, that they're so afraid to leave the bedside. And yet I know that all the people that love and support me, they're not in the room with me right now, but I know that they love and support me, even though they're not physically present. And so trust that when you leave that room for whatever moment of time, that your presence will continue. Your support and your love continues, whether you're physically in that space or not.
Thank you, Michelle. We've had a few questions from teachers, and they're asking if you have any particular insights for them, and another question about how they can get their students to express their own need for help, care, and compassion without feeling that they're being intrusive.
I think a lot of times it's really just trying to find those key words or phrases that will open up conversation. And if you can say to somebody, how are you doing? How are you coping? A lot of times, just because you open the door, then they'll start to talk. So trying to help students to find ways to express, sometimes it might be through artwork, or sometimes it's being vulnerable ourselves. And especially during a time like this, you know, with what's happening in our world, to be able to say, you know, I have questions. I have fears, just like you probably have fears. Let's talk about, you know, what you're afraid of. Let's talk about what you don't know. And let's try to explore these kinds of things instead of, you know, putting them under the carpet. But I think for teachers also have to ask for support. Teachers carry a huge load because often you're being the parent, you're being the psychologist, you're being the teacher, you're being all kinds of things. And for you to make sure that you're getting the support that you need, for you to make sure you have a circle of folks around you that you're debriefing with regularly, and maybe not just the chit chat in the staff room, but really taking that seriously, that, you know, we need to find ways to support each other and have that strength in our self-awareness.
We're getting lots of people just saying how great your talk is, Michelle, and expressing their appreciation, but we've got time for one more question, and this is about you, specifically about you. And someone wondered when you came, at what point in your life that you came to the realization that you needed to take some time for your own self-care?
Well, honestly, it's happened way more than once in my life. I think I've had a lot of epiphany moments. And as I shared already, I've been a nurse for 14 years, but I also studied theology, and I was working part-time in the emergency department and then working part-time as a pastoral minister. And then I went to work for our diocese, and then I started a program in parish nursing. And all the time, though, I kind of kept my job in Emerge because it paid the most money to help put food on the table. So, and my husband and I, he worked in social services, so his job was very stressful too. And I think there were just these aha moments that happened when my plate was too full, that I realized either I had some physical thing that was happening in my life, sore stomach or chronic disease that kind of reared its head. And I really realized, and I had good friends who said to me, you're not doing well. You need to slow down. You need to stop. And I needed to listen to them. And so because this became something that I was really interested in, I've done research. I've done a lot of soul searching. I'm a really big believer in going away on retreats. For 20 years, I've gone on 8-day silent retreats because I think I just need a chunk of time to go away and process. And so if you have an opportunity to do something like that, maybe not for 8 days, maybe just for an afternoon, do it, because it's only if you take that time for yourself that you're going to grow personally and professionally and be better for other people.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, Michelle, and thank you very much, Dan Smart. Dan Smart, by the way, is the associate publisher at 23rd Publications and a superb quarterback this afternoon with the questions. Thanks, Dan. Some really insightful thoughts there, and lots of questions. We could go on for a couple hours, I suspect, with all of them. Unfortunately, all good things must come to an end, and we're reaching that stage. So before we do draw this to a close, I'd like to ask Therese and then Karen if they have any closing thoughts. So Therese, over to you.
Well, my goodness, Michelle, you have given us so much to think about. Listening to you has really, really encouraged me to recommit to filling my own compassion tank and to keeping it full for others and also for myself. And so thank you so much for your guidance. And I'd also like to say a word of thanks to all the caregivers who have joined us today. It's really an honor to be here with you, to be sharing this time with you. And I'd like to encourage you to do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself, because you are needed and we're so grateful for you. So thank you.
For sure.
Thank you, Therese. Over to Karen.
Oh, yes. I would just want to say, Michelle, this has just been rich. It's been like food for the hungry for me anyway, and I'm sure for so many that are listening. I hope they're going to choose to buy this wonderful new book you've given us. One thing that's interesting for people to know is that this webinar that you have listened to today will be on our Henri Nouwen website and on our YouTube channel. And our publishers are also planning to make it available on their website so you can get to share this with your friends and your colleagues and your family. If you're new to the writings of Henri Nouwen, I want to encourage you to sign up on our website to receive the free daily meditations by Henri Nouwen. They're a great little daily resource for caregivers. We also have the other 2 books on caregiving, which you'll find on our website, Courage for Caregivers and Hope for Caregivers. It's been a joy to work with Nouwen and with 23rd Publications on this project. And I'm going to give it back to Joe now, but I just really do hope that you will take advantage of this moment, 20% off, and get this Healthy Caregiving book. It's a treasure. Thank you, Michelle, for what you've given us today. Thank you. And thank you to all the caregivers. Thank you for what you're doing. Thank you.
And thank you, Karen. You can never say thanks too often, so I'm going to just chime in myself with some final thank yous, and then I'll give you the details on how you can get your own copy of Healthy Caregiving with a 20% discount. But I would like to also add my thanks to all of you who are out there doing incredible work at this time. We all are struggling with the challenges of dealing with the confinement of COVID-19, finding creative ways to do that, and deep resources to help us pull through. We hope that today's session has been part of that solution for you, and we think it has. I do want to thank my colleagues, Therese Ratliff and Dan Smart from 23rd Publications, Karen Pascal from the Henri Nouwen Society. Certainly without the work of the Henri Nouwen Society, there would be no workshop today, and this book would not exist. So special thanks to the Henri Nouwen Society for all the work that they've done. So at this stage, I just want to share with you the details about how you can get your own copy of the book. So if you are a US resident, you'll see that there's a website there and an URL for 23rd Publications. If you are in Canada or outside Canada or the United States, use the Nouwen link, and there's a promo code webinar. We'll make this offer available for the next week, and see, take advantage of it. Once again, thanks to all of you from Nouwen Publishing, from 23rd Publications, and from the Henri Nouwen Society. We wish you a goodbye, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you. Bye.